So today, welcome to the April edition of the Academy Finance Professionals Power Hour. We are joined by our colleagues from the Better Financial Reporting Programme. They're going to be delivering a presentation on the View My Financial Insights tool. And sorry, would you mind just staying on mute?
I think it'd be useful.
Could you please stay on mute for the presentation? Many thanks. Thank you. So after the presentation, there will be a chance for question and answer, and there will be a tell us how we did poll. As I've said, your feedback helps shape these events, and that's invaluable. At the end of the presentation, the final item on the agenda will be a first for Academy Finance Professionals and a first for our colleagues from HMRC, VAT Education Consultants, who will be joining us today. They will be joining us to tell us that about their presentation. Next month, they're going to be delivering a session on VAT. And they will be asking you 5 short questions on VAT. This is to help them gain an understanding of your knowledge of VAT and what your needs are. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Kel. Kel, thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks for the introduction and the invite to give the session to yourselves. So the Better Financial Reporting Programme looks at improvements to the way that schools send financial data to the department. And we look to achieve this by assessing the way that data is received by us and how we can present that back to you in a way that gives you valuable insights into your position, enabling more empowered decision making by schools. Secondly, capturing the data as efficiently as possible, and where possible, only capturing it once. And thirdly, introducing a way to automate the collection from financial management systems. So forms are populated with the data and it just needs to be reviewed prior to submitting. And it's through the user research that we've been told that it's the manual inputting of data which can take a long time. Throughout the presentation and also the demonstration, we'd encourage you to ask any questions as we go along, and please use the chat function to do that. And as Pam mentioned, if you can use the upvote or the like thumbs up, we'll know which questions to prioritize in this session. What we will do is to answer as many during the call, and we'll follow up with any that we may miss. So development of VMFI started in 2019. We gathered an understanding of user needs, and we brought those concepts into development. In February 2020, we launched the first full build of VMFI, concentrating on the academy sector. And over the intervening 18 months, we extended the tool to include the maintained sector. And it's now available to a wider set of users than just the financial staff in academies and the local authorities. We've recently updated the data within VMFI so that it includes the data for the 2021/22 financial years for both the maintained and academy sectors. And behind the scenes, we're looking to improve the time that we can turn that collection around to yourselves. Volunteers are always needed. Throughout the development of VMFI, we've taken an iterative approach, checking in with users at each stage and looking to get changes and improvements out to you as quickly as possible. And it's always invaluable looking to yourselves to guide and frame the way that we build it. And so we've used the user research and feedback sessions as a way of ensuring that what we are developing, the actual course direction that we're going in, is actually to suit your needs and is actually giving you the information that you need. And it's valuable hearing what's working well and not so well, and making improvements so that it works in the best way possible. So we are looking to improve the benchmarking offer, and we will be conducting user research in the summer and autumn terms. And these will be 30 to 60-minute sessions conducted using Teams. So do consider if you'd like to support us and take part in user research. And if you do, please do get in touch using the email address betterfinancialreporting.coms@education.gov.uk. So VMFI contains data from the financial returns of the maintained schools through the consistent financial reporting return to the local authorities, and the academy schools through the accounts return to the DfE, as well as data from collections such as school census, workforce census, and condition data collection. So we hold 3 years of data in VMFI, and we can show a historical comparison to the previous year's figures and how your spend and that of your peers have changed in time. Access is available for finance teams and to school leaders, trustees and governors who support with governance and oversight, as well as granting access to SRMAs who may be supporting your schools. So VMFI will select a set of 30 default comparators for your school, and these will come from the same sector. So maintained schools from maintained schools, and likewise academies from academies. But you are able to choose to have a selection from the closest comparators from both the academies and the maintained schools. So with the additional functionality that we've built into the tool, we've looked to give you further insights on how your spend compares with peers, and to signpost you to areas of support through the commercial recommendations and resources. The VMFI tool has been designed to support finance teams within the school sector through increased efficiency by reducing the need for desk-based research regarding financial insights and data, better decision making through providing up-to-date and customizable data insights to help identify areas for further investigation, and offering access to commercial resources, including government contracts, frameworks, and guidance. So I'll now pass on to Dan to give a demonstration of the tool, and it'll be a live demonstration. And as mentioned earlier, do use the chat function for any questions which you may have. Pass over to you, Dan.
Thanks very much, Kel. Hopefully, Kel, if you just say if you can see what's on the screen now, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can see the front screen.
Lovely, thank you very much. Yes, so I'm going to be doing a quick demo of the tool so that you can see some of the things that Kel's just been talking about. Most importantly, of course, accessing the service for yourself. We have a handy guidance page imaginatively called How to Access the View My Financial Insights tool. So if you ping that into Google, you should be able to find it. It has a step-by-step guide on how to get access and what to do. Now, if we come to the service properly, this is the first page you arrive on if you log in as a school or academy. We have, of course, picked an entirely fake school here called Coketown West High School, which we've invented data for, and I'll be demoing with that with this academy. What we wanted to do with this page really is to start paying back some of that enormous investment of time and effort that school business professionals put into providing data to the DfE. So we know that you guys submit the academic accounts return, the teacher workforce census, pupil census, SEN data, enormous amount of data. And what we tried to do here is play it back to you in a way that is as useful as possible, but also as sort of timely and as efficiently as possible as well. So our first aim here is to play back to users based on their expenditure data, the top 3 areas for investigation. Now you're going to be able to drill into a lot on this tool, but this is where we start. To explain what you're looking at, we collect 35 different expenditure categories, but we actually collect them under 9 different headings. Things like IT costs, premises costs, teaching staff, teaching costs. You can again drill down into these and we'll look at that in a minute. But as you can see, what we've taken is we've got the trust view here. And for this trust, there are 3 areas where some of the academies in that trust are spending substantially differently to similar schools. So if we take the first one, Coketown West High School, the IT cost is £86 per pupil, and we tend to use per pupil as much as possible on the service because that allows us to, moderate our data for size, for the size of the school or the establishment. And this is £44 per pupil over the median of the comparator schools. And then it gives us the opportunity to say that there is a potential 28% reduction available here. 2 points I think to make. One, we know that that won't always be the case, and there may be reasons why expenditure is high or low, or out of kilter with other similar schools. And the second thing to stress is that red does not always mean bad, and in fact most of the time may not mean bad. We don't try to provide a judgment in those sorts of terms. All we plan to say is that this is an area for investigation. This is an area where this school's spending is out of line with similar schools, and therefore the school ought to have some idea of why that is. It may very well be part of their operating model and something that they are proud of and even focus on. For example, spending a lot of money on your teaching staff is sort of what a school ought to do. So we understand that, and this, as I say, this should not be taken as a rigid judgment. Now, some of these expenditure categories are comparable, and some of these are less so. So, for example, we will bring to attention things like IT costs and premises costs. We won't necessarily bring in something like special facilities, which can be very different for different schools and different types of schools. And we've put those into an other category that you can drill down into, but we don't necessarily put on the front page. So, another point to make here is that you'll see that we've got a per pupil reference under Coketown West High School, but under North Coketown you've got a £44 per metre squared. Now what we've done is we've taken certain cost categories which we think are largely driven by the size of the school in terms of pupils and how many pupils go to the school or academy, and some of those we consider in that way. On the other hand, for things like premises and utilities, our feedback suggested that the biggest driver for those costs is the conditions of the school. So we use data for the school conditions data collection to inform this, and in general we use metre squared to illustrate that data. So whilst you've got an immediate headline here, for a large trust, this may not give you anywhere near enough detail to actually get a good handle on your academy's data. So what we can do is we can click through into areas for investigation. We try to make this page as interactive as possible, and you can click on a number of areas to filter it. So for example, if you ever wanted to just some reassurance, you could click through and just look at the green areas. Although this might not be the most useful place to start, and you might be more likely to start with the red areas, i.e. those areas where spending for your individual academies is out of step with the similar schools for that academy. The other thing you can do is, because we've got this RAG rating here, you can go to wherever the eye is drawn to first, and for me I think it's probably the premises ones, and you can click through and you can look at just the areas that are related to premises. Equally, if you've got a particularly large trust, you can filter by phase and look at just the primaries, just the secondaries, just those schools in a certain district, or even individual schools on their own. If we go back a step, we're going to have a look now at the trust cost overview. Unlike the previous, so this will give you a graph for every cost category and break down the data in that way. So you can have a look at a number of different tabs and views here. You can look at per pupil or metre squared. You can look at actual spend, as in total, and you can look at a percentage of school expenditure. The other thing you can do is you can turn a RAG rating on this page. Now in this case, whilst you're looking at the overall trust, green and orange isn't comparing you to the schools in your trust. It's still keeping those comparisons to those 30 comparators schools that Kel mentioned. So St Coketown's High School is being compared to the 30 most similar schools to St Coketown's. You can drill down into a specific section. So you can teaching support staff is a very large category. You can drill down into this and you can look at specific groupings: teaching staff, supply teaching staff, education support staff. And you can look into these in sort of great detail. The other thing you can do is you can turn on a historical comparison. So as Kel mentioned, we now have 3 years worth of financial data. We have 3 years worth of all data actually in the tool. And so you can see if there are any trends occurring within the trust. If we go and have a look at what is slightly different from the school's point of view. So this is just looking at one academy within the trust. This is what users who are only applied to one academy would see. We knock it down to just 2 areas for investigation here. And we can look at things like comparing the costs to our similar schools. The way it's broken down on this front is we can click through to a specific section. So for example, teaching. And this will show your school versus the 30 most similar schools, and you can see which ones these are. We also, users asked us to provide a national average, so we've got a median score in here as well, which is the dark black line, and this provides you with the whole national data set to compare against. Now the next thing you can do is if we go to something like a different cost category and we go to non-educational support staff. Now this is an area where this academy that we're looking at, Coketown, spends perhaps more than its comparators and above the national average. So what we actually do is we try and answer that question that we get all the time, which is, so what? What do I do with this data you're playing back to me? And so on this page, you'll see that we've got this exclamation point and a link through. And if we click here, we are taken to a page I wasn't expecting. But what it ought to do in the actual environment is take you through to commercial resources. Still not working. Excuse me a moment. And when it loads, it will take us through to, eventually, if you're properly logged on, your commercial resources page. And here, what it does is it takes you to whichever section you were just looking at and provides you with that information. So for example, Coketown West High School has various recommendations for it. You could look at things like auditor costs. And here what we've got is guidance and frameworks that the DfE commercial team have negotiated and provided to make it as easy as possible for you to act upon the data that we played to you in the via the tool. Next up, we're going to have a look at our comparators. So this is a question we get a lot. How have you compared me to different schools? And we've got a page here which is dedicated to answering that question. So you can see here, we've got the data for Coketown West High School on the left-hand side. And here we've got 30 most similar schools in terms of pupil characteristics. And you might remember I said that there are some cost categories which are filtered entirely on per pupil characteristics. And there are some where we use the building characteristics to find the comparator schools. What you can then do is you can click through and you can see a side-by-side version of this. So you could have a look at, say, for example, Edgewood School, and you could go and see why this school has been compared to your school. And you can see that we're talking about a school with broadly similar numbers of pupils, we use an algorithm then for things like free school meals and SEN, so that we also have overall a similar type of school and a similar phase, whether or not it has a sixth form, whether or not it's PFI, and hopefully a relatively similar local authority type. The other thing we do on that page, by the way, is provide contact information for the Academy Trust, the other Academy Trust or academies. This means that if you see a, for example, CFO's email address linked to a school that you'd like to know more about because you think they're doing something impressive, you can email them, make contact, and in that way we hope people out in the sector will share best practice. One other thing I want to show you is on the Trust view. We're going to go to the home page for the Trust view. And because we also have budget data as well as the Academy Accounts return, for trusts we're able to show you the forecasts and risks page. Now on this page, it plots the budget forecast return against the Academy Accounts return, so that you can see if there are any differences or variance in your spending versus what was planned or what was forecasted to have been spent. Now in this case, a useful point here is because we are noting that the BFR suggests a worsening financial position, we provide a link, which we don't provide to everyone on this page, to the School Resource Management Guidance. We hope that this again will answer that question of so what, and provide users with a jump-off point to go and look at other resources and other pieces of guidance that the department's gathered to help schools improve their finances. This whole page as well can be seen in a downloadable PDF version, which can be used to share with finance committees, governors, trustees, and other stakeholders. Now, obviously, up till now, what we've done is we've provided you with the 30 comparative schools to try and take that bit of the work away from you and to do it automatically for you. But one thing that we found users wanted to be able to do is to select their own comparative schools. Lots of reasons for this. I know for sure that when I was a teacher, we used to compare ourselves to the school down the road in just about everything. And the only important thing was, are we beating that school? There may be less petty reasons to compare yourself to other schools, and so we provided all sorts of different ways to do that. On the left-hand side, you see we've got filters. So anything on this list you can filter by, and you can find comparators that way. Some reasonable suggestions might be things like you might only want to compare yourself to schools that are doing particularly well in terms of Ofsted ratings. You might want to compare yourself to schools or academies that have the exact same SEND makeup as you do, perhaps, or perhaps even aspirationally, those with high levels of inclusion. Lots and lots of ways to do it. And of course, there's always the option of just going local. What you'll do when you start putting in these is you'll start whittling down the number of academies you're selecting from. So we're down to just 16,957, so it's quite a lot to pick from. So let's whack in an SEND number over here. Excuse me. If we put in 1.5 to 1.8, we're now left with 36 schools. And you can add schools to the list, your comparator list, by clicking the buttons on the right hand side. Now we'd suggest that people always try to include more than 10 and less than 30 for the most, to get the most out of the service. Another thing we heard from our users was that there are many instances where modelling the data, i.e. changing it or editing it, could be useful. So I'll show you this next. There are, as I said, there are a lot of reasons that you might want to do this. You can go through this page here and you can begin to edit the figures that we've provided. So we show you what figures we have in every area, and you can then adjust the data as you see fit, putting in different custom values. Now, A couple of reasons why you might do this. One is if you wanted to do some scenario planning for a future year, it can be a useful tool for that. It can also be perhaps to edit a mistake if there was one, either due to submission error or anything else that you might have found. Or perhaps if you want to compensate for a particularly odd year, perhaps you had an enormous amount of staff absence due to sickness or something, and you can edit the data so that you can still try and get useful comparisons and analysis out of the spend data that we're showing you. Now, just to say, this doesn't alter the data that you've submitted to the DFE. It won't alter the data that other users see. But what it will do is provide you with that facility for sort of local users. And you can then share that with people who are relevant. The next piece of functionality that we were asked for was to provide some introductory ICFP. ICFP is Integrated Curriculum and Financial Planning. And I should stress at this point that whilst it's a very useful tool to help schools plan and adjust their curriculum, this is a beginner's version only. There'll be some people that are already au fait with ICFP, that people use it regularly. We provide various Excel dashboards, excuse me, on if you were to follow this link or to Google ICFP. And some of those tools and dashboards go into more depth than we do in this tool. But what we have tried to do is produce something that makes life as easy as possible for new ICFPers to access this kind of functionality. So what we've done is we drag all of the data that we have on the academies or schools into this service. We pre-populate the data, and you can then go in and make adjustments yourself to that data if you're doing your financial planning for next year, for example. But we'll also ask you for a few things which we can't provide. So if we go and have a look at an example of that, excuse me, there are some bits where we just don't have the data and we need you to put it in for us. And that provides us with the chance to play back some of the main points from ICFP, but it also provides us with a few different metrics that you can use. As we say, it's a starting point. It may be incredibly useful, but there are opportunities as well to go and have a look at more detailed versions of ICFP. And this is functionality that we're still working on and looking to improve. I think this brings us to the end of the demonstration, but we do have some of the sort of wiser older heads of the team. So I might just give a small opportunity for Kel or Gavin if there's anything else that you think I might have missed. But other than that, we will move over to the Q&A section.
Hi, Dan. Hi, everyone. I think you've covered everything in there. So it's been a good demo. There's been lots of questions going on in the chat, and we will try and run through those. Kel, do you want to cover the access bit first, and then we'll go on to that?
Yeah, so we'll just look at the access bit. So access is one of the questions that we tend to get asked a number of times, either through our comms box or through the webinars. And so, first of all, what we'd encourage you to do as a school user is to register for DFE sign-in and use the DSI account. And when you've done this, you'll need to have a role and request permissions from your school or trust. And VMFI sits under the View Your Education Data service. And so we'd suggest that you look for a View Your Education Data dash VMFI Academy for user role. And that will then give you access into the tool, but your school or trust will need to approve this request. And then to access the service for the first time, you go to View Your Education Data. Sorry, I'll say that one again. viewyourdata.education.gov.uk, and then you go through the Start Now button and you choose the school or academy as the option to continue, and then you log in with your credentials. For members of the trust team, then it will be a case of looking through using the IDAMS, the separate sign-in system that is there. And that's the part 4 access. So if we come to Q&A, so Gav, I think we should answer the first question about the why can't I print off and download lots of things from VMFI?
Yeah, so we do get this question a fair bit, and it is something we're really keen to find a solution for. The problem is the technology we built it on is Microsoft Power BI. It's an interactive tool. You kind of use it to click into, and every time you kind of click a button, it brings up a new layer of information in the same window, and that actually means downloading reports is problematic for that particular technology. So we are trying to find a way around it because it is something that's really commonly asked for by schools. And that'll be something we really want to do. We are aware that schools do things like screen grabs, because quite often schools will want to put a bit of their own context around that. So kind of taking the screen grab of the particular chart that's of interest, and then drop it into Word or a PowerPoint slide and putting a little bit of commentary alongside it. And we're also aware that some schools will kind of use it interactively within a trustee meeting or an SLT meeting, popping up on a screen for everybody to look at. So it's not quite the same as you may be used to with other tools, but that's kind of the technology is designed to be an interactive online tool to work with.
Thanks, Gavin. How are comparator groups selected for each school? What are the metrics that are used?
Yeah, so each school is within 2 separate comparator groups. You're based on one group for your pupil characteristics. That is driven mostly by pupil numbers, the proportion of pupils on free school meals, the proportion of pupils with levels of SEN within your phase. So kind of the first element is phase, so you kind of primary, secondary, special, AP, and then those characteristics kick in. Where we have cost categories for premises and utilities, schools told us that what's a better driver of those costs is the building itself rather than the pupils being educated within it. So for those cost categories, your building comparator groups are based on gross internal floor area, average age of buildings, PFIs in there, boardings in there. Again, there's kind of a layer, but the main 2 are gross internal floor area and average age of buildings.
Thanks, Gavin. So with the data that is used in the tool, sometimes there might be differences in coding, classifications, and maybe they appear to be incorrect, or people disagree with the figures that are displayed by us. What can people do?
So I think on the kind of first part around that, about the data changing, so the returns have been really quite consistent for a number of years now. Certainly since the accounts return became an online form 7 years ago, we really haven't changed fundamentally the section of that return, the benchmarking section, which is the data that is used within the tool. What we've done, what we do within that return is provide a range of validations that check the data submitted to the front end to try and make sure it's as accurate as possible before the data comes in. But it's never perfect. You know, we kind of have to acknowledge that. So one of the other things we've done now is to try and provide a more consistent way of reporting. We've got the Academy Chart of Accounts, which around 1/3 of the sectors used. That is fully mapped to the code. So if you are kind of looking at a particular cost and thinking, you know what, the guidance isn't 100% accurate, I'm not sure which one to put it in, the Chart of Accounts will show you exactly what those codes are mapped to. And even if you're not using the Chart of Accounts within your own trust, it's still there as an Excel download on gov.uk. You can kind of have a look at it and say, well, the department treats those costs in this way. So again, it will give you a bit of a steer. In terms of the numbers, once they're pushed back out as insights into VMFI and back out to you. So we don't do anything with the numbers that you submit to us. So your accounts return, which has been signed off by your trust and signed off by your auditor, we use that data. So if you see something coming back out in VMFI that makes you think that data is wrong, it's come in that way. We don't do anything with the data, and because it's being signed off by yourselves in auditor on the point of submission, it can't be changed for that year. Hopefully it'll point things out to correct or change going forward, but that's what we do. We don't fiddle with your data.
Thanks, Gavin. How do we account for central costs?
So costs at the centre by a multi-academy trust. What we do with those costs is we share them across the constituent academies within the trust based on pupil numbers, or if it's premises and utility costs based on gross internal floor area. And the reason we do that is to enable schools to still be able to compare costs alongside schools in single academy trusts, or as Cal mentioned at the beginning, with maintained schools that are incurring those costs themselves directly rather than the MAP providing a wider service. So that's the reason why we share them out on that basis.
Thanks. There's a comment here that's saying that it would be helpful if it could be recorded which schools outsource key services such as catering or cleaning.
Yeah, we've so some of that we've got a bit of a clue for, but we actually don't collect data from yourselves about how you run services, which services you outsource, which services you run in-house. We don't kind of collect that data for a number of areas. Catering, we do have a clue because we do actually collect catering costs through, well, primarily through 3 areas. One is staff, supplies, and the other one is contracts. So actually, if you outsource your catering, then your costs would appear as a catering contract cost. And similarly, if you add in in-house provision, it would appear as staffing that you obviously employ to run the service in-house. So with catering, you do get a bit of a feel, and when you have a look at the catering, the detail within the catering cost category, sometimes you'll see a reduced number of schools you're being compared to. For example, if you were looking at catering contract costs, some schools of your group may not appear, and that's because actually if you used one of the other sub-cost categories such as catering staff, you'll see them on there, which gives you an indication that they've got an in-house service. We still do it that way because sometimes it's useful for schools to see, comparable schools, how they run their different services, and actually is there a better or lesser value by being in-house or external. But for a lot of other costs where we don't collect that level of detail, it's something we really can't advise on because we don't hold the data.
Thanks, Gav. Coming here, we were advised by ESFA to include our post-19 subsidiary. Consolidated accounts in our accounts return. Does that therefore mean VMFI cannot be used for us?
It doesn't mean VMFI can't be used for you by you. It does come with a complication because obviously that subsidiary is within your return. I'm assuming that will be as part of a MAT central cost and therefore be shared out on the basis I've just highlighted a couple of minutes ago. The functionality data modelling within VMFI, what you could do is strip out the post-19 costs and use a data model version. You'll get all of the functionality of VMFI just without those costs in. A bit of a chew, but it kind of does reflect the uniqueness of having a post-19 subsidiary within your organisation, but it's still usable. But yeah, a little bit more fiddly for you, I'm afraid.
Here's one. Why does VMFI highlight different areas for investigation than the benchmarking report card?
Yeah, so the benchmarking report card, which sits on the Schools Financial benchmarking website, is kind of a high-level intro into the benchmarking site. So if you are a 1200 place secondary school or something of that ilk, the benchmarking report card will compare you to around about 1,000 other schools. and the metrics that underpin it and rate you will be based on that comparator group. VMFI goes in much more detail to create a much tighter comparator group, schools that are much more similar to you, and providing you with much more detailed analytics based on that. So that's the reason for the difference, is mostly down to the group of schools you're being compared with and the size of that. The other part of that is the metrics that underpin it and give the RAG ratings on the benchmarking report cards are based on kind of averages, which we do update during the year, but at a point in time might not be fully, might not relate to the current year, but it's based on those benchmarks, those metrics that underpin the tool itself. Within VMFI, your rating is where you are placed compared to your 30 most similar schools. And again, the RAG rating isn't meant to, as Dan mentioned, it isn't meant to flag up a concern or an issue. It actually came from schools. Schools said it would be really helpful just to have something that gave us a clue as to which areas we should identify first, and colour was a good one. And then when we talked about different colours, it just came back to red, amber, green, because that's what everybody was familiar with.
Okay, I'll bring these both in together, these two comments. So one saying that it's good information, but a hard system to navigate and log in, and that data in the boxes, sometimes you have to scroll within the box, and so for the comparative schools, you can only see 5 at a time. Even if you take a screenshot, it's a bit fiddly. Yeah.
So hard systems navigate and log in. We do have some problems with logging in. We've tried to make that as simple as we possibly can through the advice, the step-by-step guidance we've got on gov.uk, and also there's a little video we've recorded that kind of takes you step by step through the process as well, which we can provide a link to after the event. Sometimes it comes down to, because access is given by a super user within a school, and sometimes people aren't familiar with who that is, and it's little local things can cause problems as well, and it's unfortunate, but we do recognise that. We try to make sure that everybody can get in as easy as possible. Hard system to navigate. If you're up for a conversation, as we touched on before, we're always keen to try and make the navigation and the way through better, more intuitive, and easy experience, because ultimately we want schools to use not only this tool but the other tools that we put out to help you make decisions. And if we don't do a good enough job with that, then it doesn't make your life any easier, does it? So we'll be keen to kind of understand more of the user journey issues. Data in the boxes, you have to scroll down to see comparative schools. You can only see 5 at a time. I think I might be making an assumption here. I think this is probably the trust view, where you kind of see your schools within your trust. Because when you look at a school view, you've got the one big chart on there with all 30 comparator schools on there in one view. There are ways and means we could, the areas to investigate, select a page within the tool, kind of gives you that information in table format, and you can filter that down by individual schools or by areas that your trust operates in, and we'll give you a tabular list which you can hopefully shorten or focus on particular cost categories. It might be a different way of looking at that data, but that may be worth a look. But again, we can see what we can try and do with the graphs and charts. VMFI over the year, we've kind of started with one big wide chart, and users says, no, there's too much information to scroll down. We prefer 2, and you kind of have to sacrifice some of the screen space. But again, if it's all down to usability, then we're up for looking at it.
Yeah, and if you don't, sorry, if I can just pop in before we continue, Cal, just on that point, when we're looking to improve the service, what we do is we organise 30-minute to an hour calls with people, and we'll do things like put up different sorts of prototypes on the screen. I thought I might just ping something up because there was a question about central services benchmarking. So what we did when we were investigating what we could do on that front was we essentially built a bunch of prototypes of what different central services benchmarking might look like. And then we went and spoke to loads of users and we asked them what they would find useful, what they might find better. And we follow exactly that process whenever we're trying to improve the system. So if there is anything that you're looking at today and going, oh, this is a bit clunky or this is a bit difficult, that's exactly what we're asking really. Do ping us an email. You should have our email addresses easily accessible, and any of us will set you up with someone to speak to. We're particularly interested if there are any head teachers or any CFOs. So if that describes you, please do ping us an email and get in touch. And around June, we'll be kicking off a very big user research campaign. Sorry for the interruption. Back to you, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Okay, so we've got some about the data and also schools joining, say, MAT part year through, and the timeliness of the data and when will that be improved?
The timeliness of the data, sorry, Cal, just you crackled there, was that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we so the accounts return data comes into us back end of January, and the site was updated 1st of March. So we turn this data around really quickly. It's one of the things we focus on. It used to take us a matter of months to get benchmark information out. We've now really pulled that forward. Intrinsically, it's linked to the data that comes in from you. And we appreciate you've got year end and your accounts and everything else to do, so kind of making that a quicker process is probably off the cards, but we do try and turn the data around once we get it as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, thanks. Where does the internal floor area data?
Sorry, Kel, I didn't pick up the other part of that, wasn't it, which was the new school. Or school joining a MAT partway through the year. So yes, when we designed VMFI, what we call kind of part year data, we excluded because it can affect the comparator groups you're in, and you kind of comparing your actual full pupils to a part year spend. So we kind of parked it as a problem to solve. We've actually got a proof of concept we've been reviewing. It's in our test environment about how we can solve that. So a solution to that's not very far away at all. We just need to make sure that we work it through properly, make sure it doesn't have any knock-on impacts, and hopefully that one's not too far away down the line, and then schools which do join the new Academy Trust during the year will be able to get some use from VMFI from their part year data. Interestingly enough, with that, one of the things that schools told us with that is they had a preference for us to annualise that data and to look at it that way. So that would be our default, but will be an ability to kind of at a click of a button be able to change it to the actuals that was submitted as of the part of the year. But again, that was based on entirely on user feedback from the sector.
Thanks, Gav. Okay, I think I did mention to somebody else that maybe one more question, but we'll maybe do 2 quick questions, and then I think we'll have to wrap this up. So where does the internal floor area data originate from?
The condition data collection, the capital colleagues submit. You submit to our capital colleagues, so it comes from that data set. And is there a possibility to compare similar multi-academy trusts? Oh, what a good question. Yeah, it's something that's kind of been on the radar for quite a while. It's something we'd like to do. The difficulty we had was statistically creating groups that had enough similar academy trusts within it, because as soon as you start to look at academy trusts of different sizes, you recognise that they might have a different mix of phases, primary and secondary. The schools within them will just look quite different to others, and aggregating at the trust level and creating robust comparable groups has always been too difficult to then say, do you know what, if you compare yourself to that trust, you'll get something that's really useful from it. It is something that kind of keeps coming up, and it is something we'll continue to work at, but that's kind of the reason why it's not there at the moment. But if metrics do come to the fore, that would be really useful between trusts. We are completely up for bringing them in.
Thanks, Gav. And thanks very much, Pam, for the invite to come to this and to be able to present VMFI to your members.
Thanks very much, Kel and Daniel and Gavin. That was really informative and really helpful. Thank you.